You're listening to the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, your host, Ben Eagle. Please remember to subscribe to the show wherever you are listening. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 195 of the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, Ben Eagle. Today, we're heading to Derbyshire to speak to dairy farmer Jessica Langton. Despite only being in her 20s, Jess already has an impressive CV and bags of passion, enthusiasm, and drive for a career in agriculture. As well as working on the family dairy farm, she studied animal science at the University of Nottingham and is currently on a grad scheme with Genus, who she worked with on a part-time basis while doing her degree. She was a driving force for introducing Jersey and Norwegian Red genetics into her family's pedigree Holstein and Friesian herd, and she also has a strong interest in improving sustainability on the farm. This interest in sustainability goes wider, and indeed, when she was at Nottingham, she was part of Enactus Nottingham, a not-for-profit organisation run by students, and her social enterprise there worked with Arla to investigate feeding seaweed to ruminants as a way of reducing methane emissions. Jess was an NFU student and young farmers ambassador last year. She's an appointee on the NFU Dairy Board, and in 2021, she was named Agricultural Student of the Year at both the British Farming Awards and the Farmers Weekly Awards. And I don't think that you get many people in their 20s with an introduction, I'm going to say, like that, let alone a CV like that. Jess, welcome to Meet the Farmers. How's your week going?
Hi, Ben. Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, my week's busy, but it's going good. So, get married in just over 5 weeks. So, quite busy with wedding prep at the moment.
Oh, congratulations. That's great news. Is that delayed from COVID years or?
No, no. So, we got engaged sort of 2.5 years ago. So, it was sort of around that COVID-y, you know, how they had like the different zones.
Yeah.
It was around that time. So, we thought we'll leave it for quite a long time to just sort of get through the pandemic. And we could have probably had it a year earlier, but here we are.
Oh, I hope you have a fantastic day anyway. Um, Tell us about what you're doing on your grad scheme, first of all, with Genus, and also how you first got involved with Genus.
Yeah, so I'm now on the Genus graduate scheme, which is where you do 6 months with Genus, 6 months with Promar International, and then 6 months in an area of the business of your choice. So I started working for Genus nearly 4 years ago now as an RMS technician on their Insights program. So I was looking for a job to do alongside my degree, and I saw this like part-time specialist job advertised that was specifically aimed at students, and applied for it and was successful in the role. So I spent 3.5 years as a specialist whilst I did my degree, which sort of worked out quite handy because the specialists were classed as key workers. So it gave me the opportunity to get out of the house during COVID. So it gave me a purpose alongside the farm while studying. So I did that. Then I applied for the grad scheme and was successful in gaining a place on that. I've just finished my 6 months with Genus and just started my 6 months with Promar. So I've done loads of different things. I've done sales and sort of done major business projects and that sort of thing, really enjoying it. I quite like the diversity of the program, so I'm like quite keen to get new entrants into the industry. And I think the Genus grad scheme attracts people from a farming and a non-farming background. So for example, this year we've got 3 people on the scheme that aren't from a farming background and 2 that aren't, and that mix is really, really nice. In
Awesome.
terms of sort of a collaborative environment.
I mean, for anyone, dare I say, anyone not from a livestock background, let alone anyone from a non-farming background as well, do you want to just tell us a little bit about Genus and Promar and what they actually do?
Yeah, so Genus is a bovine genetics company. So it's mainly looking at marketing bull semen and with a big focus on sustainability. So they pioneer genetic improvement to feed a growing population. And they also have other products such as like silage additive, teat dips, and their health and welfare rumination collars. So they are sort of the main services that Genus offer, as well as the specialist side of things as well, of course.
Yeah.
Should remember that one, having done it for 3.5 years. Um, and yeah, then Promar International is a large consultancy business, but they also have quite a large sustainability team as well. So they get heavily involved with the Arla climate checks. And then you've got the farm business consultancy side of the company. And you've got farm business secretaries, farm business analysts that sort of look at accounts and sort of DEFRA projects, that kind of thing. It's a really diverse business that focus on a lot of different aspects of agriculture, but there's becoming more and more of a focus on sustainability within Promar.
Yeah. I think that's really well summarized. Let's move across to the home farm, the farm at home, and the herd as well.
Yeah, so I've actually moved in with my partner now. We sort of moved in for a year. So he milks 250 Holstein cross Norwegian red cows.
Yeah.
But the farm that I'm originally from at home, so that's a Lochlan herd of pedigree Holsteins, and they're sort of my showing girls. We do have the Jersey and the Norwegian Red in
Yeah.
there as well to sort of increase the fat and constituents. But I also like to keep my pedigree girls for showing with. We've got a couple of good prospects, and we also had our 1st of April born calf born this morning. So just
Awesome.
a weeks late, but she is massive and she's looking really good.
Good.
Last year we had some herbal lays planted because we're quite keen on becoming a sustainable and regenerative farm in line with sort of the First Milk values. So First Milk is the processor that we sell our milk to, and they want us to improve our constituents whilst also farming with a regenerative approach. So we are hoping to achieve that with the sustainable farming incentive, countryside stewardship, and just finishing off a higher level stewardship as well. I think this is our final year of that before we move into sort of the countryside stewardship. So we're looking at putting in herbal lays, and we planted a little bit more woodland, and we're just looking at improving our genetics. So having cows with a high feed advantage. So they're sort of a smaller cow that would produce the same amount of milk as a larger cow, that they just eat less, with a high fat and protein. And that's sort of where that Jersey and Norwegian Red and Friesian come into the mix.
How long have you been showing? What sort of age did you start?
So I started showing when I was 5, showed for a
Wow.
few years, then stopped. And then I sort of got back into it, I think 4 years ago now. So
Okay.
a couple of years ago, we had a really good calf that won at like the qualifying show for All Breeds All Britain. And then she was in the top 10 at All Breeds All Britain as well. So
Wow.
I got the bug for it and carried on from there.
This episode is being supported by our primary sponsor, A-Plan Rural. Why did I want to collaborate with A-Plan Rural? Well, having got to know them, their team shares my passion for giving a voice to farmers, and we are both driven to raise the profile of farming voices to a wider audience. So it seemed quite a good fit. Quite frankly, together we will be able to do a lot more. A-Plan Rural do a lot of work on social media themselves, sharing farming accounts and farming stories. They have a rural community blog which shares farmers' experiences, and they also support a growing number of initiatives that champion UK farmers, including this podcast. So a big thank you to A-Plan Rural for supporting Meet the Farmers. Next one's about understanding you a bit more. Actually, I've started doing this with a few people. I think it's a really interesting one to sort of how people sort of describe themselves. How would you describe yourself in 3 words?
Yeah, I'm quite a driven and direct person, I'd say. Quite passionate, very passionate about like dairy farming and dairy in general. And then I had to think really hard about the last one, because it's like, how do you describe yourself as like a person that has so much going on and it's like total chaos? I was like, I don't think chaotic is the quite word, but like very busy as well. But yeah, definitely driven, definitely passionate, and then sort of always busy, just always keen to get involved. I don't really like sitting still.
Yeah. What about sort of, because I'm guessing that mean, you've got a farming background. You obviously grew up with a passion for it, but also because you do like doing lots of different things and you do lots of different things now as well, did you ever consider maybe going doing something else instead of the farming, or has it always been, I want to farm, I also want to do something else as well?
No, I actually really wanted to be a doctor for a while.
Oh, really? Okay.
So I did some work experience in a hospital. It was actually really, really sad because there was some very ill patients in there. And sadly, like a couple of them passed away whilst I was there. And in that moment of time, I would pass out. And at that point, I just knew it was not the career for me. I just
Yeah.
couldn't handle the environment of everybody being ill, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I did want to be a doctor for a while, but with the work experience, I decided I was much more suited to the agricultural world.
And what about Nottingham? Because I'm guessing that had a big impact on you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was quite unfortunate that the majority of my uni experience was a COVID uni experience, but
Of
I think
course.
Nottingham was probably one of the better universities when it came to handling the pandemic from a student perspective. Nottingham was always very keen to help and get you involved in different things. And I think because we've got like an agricultural campus and then a main campus, and you're sort of mixed in with biotechnology students, so students from all different backgrounds, you can get involved in a range of different things. And I think that's how I sort of came across Enactus. I was involved in the Women in STEM Society, getting that up and running, and also a member of the Agric Society and was on their committee for 2 years as well. Nottingham's great because it's so big and there's so much variety across the two different campuses. Yeah, you could get involved in anything and everything. So I think it helped nurture my need for adventure, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Just yeah, despite during being there during COVID, it's
Yeah.
yeah, no, for sure. Talking of Enactus, tell us a little bit more about the seaweed project. Because so you were investigating the impact of feeding seaweed on methane emissions of cattle. Which I seem to remember we actually spoke briefly about this when you were on the Kite podcast.
Yeah, no. So I've been away from it for a bit now, but it's definitely still operating. But whilst I was at uni, I joined this project Ecologico, which is one of the Enactus projects, and it was looking at feeding cows seaweed to reduce their methane emissions. So when I first joined the team, it was just in its initial startup. So we were looking at finding different products that had high bromoform levels because it's the bromoform that reacts with the cow's rumen to reduce the enteric fermentation. So we came across lots of different things like citrus products, seaweed, and also fumaric acid. So they were like the top three with the highest bromoform levels. And we purchased some seaweed and started growing that. But by the time we'd finished growing the seaweed, I'd exited the project just because I got too old and had to graduate.
Okay.
So, from what I gather, they tested the seaweed and its bromoform levels weren't as high as they hoped. So, they were hoping to go back to the drawing board and see if they could come up with something a little bit stronger or perhaps
Okay.
like condense it down. But I think some of the limiting factors with it were cost as well. Like this product will be very costly to a farmer to purchase, which I think definitely needs to be taken into consideration because there's definitely becoming it's becoming a hot topic within the industry because enteric fermentation is sort of somewhere between 45 to 55% of emissions on your working dairy farm. So it's definitely going to be tackled at some point, but it needs to be done in the right way so that farmers aren't out of pocket. But the project in itself was quite successful because we took it, each university across the UK has an Enactus team, and you sort of compete against each other as to who has the best project. And
Yeah.
we pitched Ecologico and Foodprint that year, and they came second nationally. So that
Wow.
was really nice.
Blimey. I was going to say, yeah, because on top of that, you've got a run of other awards as well. So it's that was quite a busy time on the red carpet for you.
Yeah, it was a busy year.
Despite being in your 20s, and a lot of people in their 20s, dare I say, might be heavily involved in young farmers. but it's rare that you come across someone who's as involved in wider industry stuff as you are, to the extent you are. So including stuff with the NFU, for example. Why is it important for you to get involved in the wider industry stuff now?
I think it's important for everybody sort of in their early 20s, early 30s to get involved with the wider industry, particularly from an NFU perspective, because that's sort of politically based and policy takes a long time. We're essentially the next generation of farming, but let's say policies take sort of 5, maybe 10 years to go through. We need to be the people driving these, as there's a good chance that we'll be the people farming when these things come into place. Like Brexit happened years ago now, but we're still waiting for the
Yeah.
definitive replacement for BPS. So we need those young people driving these sorts of things, as these are the things that we've got to learn to farm with in the future. And I think the more involved you get from a younger age, the more you broaden your own knowledge and you learn about the challenges, you learn about the opportunities, and you learn about the way that you could shape your farm to sort of become in line with the future of agriculture. For example, at the minute, I think the hot topic is sustainability. So we've got countryside stewardship, we've got the sustainable farming incentive, but we do need to tackle things like methane, animal health and welfare. We have the fantastic standards across the UK, but there's always ways where you could go further. So it's just always being one step ahead, I'd say. And I think by getting involved in as many things as possible, you put yourself in the best position to achieve that.
Fantastic. Where do you see yourself in 10 years' time?
Yeah, I had to think about this question because you get asked it quite a lot, and
Yeah.
quite honestly, I have no idea, but it will be doing something within the dairy industry. I don't know whether that still be with Genus, whether
Yeah.
that be farming full time. I don't know, but I'm definitely happy doing what I'm doing now. But I do like change. I like challenge. So who knows? Wherever I see the next challenge is probably where I'll be, I would have
Yeah.
thought.
Keep it flexible. I think that sounds very sensible. But in the short term, though, yeah, you've clearly got a lot going on, including getting married, dare I say it, I now know. What else have you got coming up this year?
Yeah, the wedding's a big thing. And then we're going honeymoon in the next month. I suppose, yeah, I hadn't actually really thought a lot past that, to be honest. I
Yeah,
guess it's
I'm
just
not
having a
surprised.
nice summer, being moved out and yeah, just playing with cows, showing cows, milking cows, work. Yeah, that makes that's so normal, isn't it?
Oh, well, no, it's nice. I quite like that. It's quite nice that sort of normality sometimes. Let's move on to a part of the show where we talk about challenges. If you could only pick one, and there are several, and I mean, you've already referred to sustainability, I suppose, quite a bit, but what do you see as perhaps one of the biggest challenges in farming at the moment? And that could be dairy, that could be more broadly.
I think across the entire industry, it's got to be labour at the moment. The labour challenges within the industry are
Yeah,
devastating. It's just finding good staff and then keeping them are two separate challenges in themselves. And I think both are a struggle at the moment for all farmers of all types across the UK. I mean, you've got dairy farmers considering robots because they're struggling to cover milking shifts. And I just think
yeah,
from a mental health perspective, having to work so many hours as well for farmers must take a toll. Yeah, even pigs as well. I know they've been struggling. The
yeah.
labourers, abattoirs. It's just, I think farming's seen as hard and dirty work, but from going around different farms whilst I've been on placement with Genus and talking to different farmers, I think the farmers that are having the most success in staffing their business are those that have many members of staff working smaller shifts.
Okay.
So whether or not we see more of a shift towards this in the future, I'm not sure, but I definitely think something needs to be done because we need to attract good people to our industry, but then we also need to keep them. It is a challenge faced by most, if not all, farmers
Yeah.
at some
And
stage.
And it's strange, isn't it? Because in terms of outreach, I mean, there's more and more. There's loads of farmers now on social media putting out their story. There's obviously massive YouTubers. Yeah, there was Jeremy Clarkson getting his message out. Farming has become far more, I suppose, visible. But do you think that's enough? Do you think that's enough to actually encourage, or is this more of a like, if it's so foreign to people, then why would they enter the industry?
I think it's really good, the publicity that farming is receiving. At the moment, it's fantastic to have Clarkson's Farm. It's fantastic to have YouTubers. It's fantastic to have podcasts like these. And I think it's great that they paint farming in a realistic way. But
Yeah,
I think partly it's the hours, partly it's the type of work,
yeah,
and it's just seeking sort of skilled staff. And I don't know what the solution is. I've spoke to different farmers and nobody seems to have a one size fits all thing. But I don't really think we could be doing. I think you can always do more with social media, but I don't necessarily think it will attract people to the industry. It'd be nice to see more sort of council tenancies aimed at younger people so that they can sort of get a foot in the door to
yeah,
the industry, because we have plenty of young people coming in, but then it's keeping them because they can make more money going elsewhere, or they don't have the opportunity to start up on their own because farms are expensive, tenancies are hard to come about, and are also highly sought upon by perhaps bigger farms. So it's creating the opportunities for people as much as anything, I think.
yeah. And that to a certain extent, it has to start from within, doesn't it? It has to actually those opportunities have to be created and made available.
They do, yeah.
Um, so to dairy specifically, certainly pricing is going to be a bit of an interesting one, certainly until about quarter three at least this year. Uh, but yes, dairy's always a fascinating world to be in. What's your perspective on dairy this year, and challenges ahead?
Definitely fascinating, and in my very biased opinion, the best. But no, like you say, milk price is definitely going to be challenging. I mean, dairy farmers, we had a good year last year, although we had very high input prices. We also had a very high milk price, which
Yeah,
definitely helped farmers get by. I mean, 50 pence has really never been heard of before. But I think we're now seeing it come down to those high 30s. Will it go to mids? Who
yeah,
knows? There is a chance that our input costs become higher than our outputs, which isn't great. So I think we'll see a lot of farmers struggle from that perspective. And I also think Labour's coming back to Labour, that's probably
mm,
one of the other biggest problems associated with dairying. I wouldn't say we have challenges with legislation, but there's definitely more and more legislations coming in that farmers have to meet, which is doable, but sometimes they require heavy investment. And I think there just needs to be more clarity around them. And it's just ensuring that they're fair for the farmers. But yeah, I definitely think milk price is going to be at the top of most dairy farmers' agendas at this
no, for
current
sure.
moment in time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That whole question of cost of reduction. Um, but you're still optimistic for dairy. I mean, certainly the long term future looks good, right?
Yeah, definitely. I would say so. We've got countryside stewardship coming in. We've got more sustainable farming incentive coming, hopefully later this summer. So there's definitely more opportunities to sort of do more with the land to help replace that BPS. But I think if we can keep the milk price to sort of low 40s, we have seen the price of fertilizer come down to sort of around that 400-ish pounds mark. So if input costs keep coming down and the milk price perhaps goes up a little bit, or certainly doesn't drop anymore, I think we should have perhaps not as good a year as last year, but still a decent year
Yeah,
going
yeah.
forwards.
Just a little more about our primary sponsor, A Plan Rural. They provide bespoke insurance cover for farms and estates. This could be for anything from tractors and machinery to a new exciting diversification venture. So for more information, visit aplan.co.uk/rural. That's aplan.co.uk/rural. Brilliant. I'm going to start to round up, I'll ask you the two questions I ask everyone at the end of the show. First is, Jess, what is your message for the public?
Just keep supporting farmers. Look for British in supermarket. Always have in mind British farmers, the welfare standards, the efforts that farmers go to try and produce good quality, sustainable food. Keep drinking milk from a dairy farmer perspective.
Yeah.
Eat plenty of cheese, lots of yogurts, lots of butter.
Finally, your message for farmers.
Yeah, keep supporting each other. Keep providing opportunities to younger people, support the next generation. That's the key message. Just look out for one another as best as we can. We are a team.
And finally, your recommendation for a blog, podcast, or social media account to follow. It can be farming or non-farming.
Yeah, so I had a quick think about this, and one of my fellow student and young farmer ambassadors last year, Rebecca, has a podcast, Becca and Lizzie, or previously known as Boots and Heels.
Yeah.
So I definitely recommend that one. It is a farming one. They're two fantastic ladies.
Absolutely.
I definitely give it a listen if you've got time.
Brilliant. That's a great shout out. Jess, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been great seeing you because we were saying before we've been recording, it's been a couple of years, I think, which is mad.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
But no, thanks so much for coming on. And yeah, always good to talk dairy.
Definitely. Thanks.
We will leave it there for today. That is it for today. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to the show wherever you're listening. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Next week, we'll be talking about this year's Open Farm Sunday with Annabelle Shackleton. And on the Rural Business Focus podcast this week, it's a solo episode with me. We're discussing motivation, something that I have needed at times this week, must be said. Thanks again to Jess for today and to our primary podcast sponsor, A Plan Rural Insurance, for supporting the show. Please see the show notes for more information and for any links mentioned today. For now, though, I'm Ben Eagle. This has been Meet the Farmers. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you all have a great week.